Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. Today, I'm with Andrew Poles of andrewpoles.com. He's an executive coach. Super excited to get into this episode. I think we're going to get into some of the psychology behind the difference between getting your business started and then operating your business. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ken. I'm excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Thank you for joining us. Really excited to learn about your insights and this transition that so many founders inevitably have to go through if they're going to continue being an entrepreneur. But before we get into that section of the show, Andrew, do you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what possessed you to get into this line of business?
Yeah, absolutely. So who I am is a dad. I'm a girl dad first and foremost. I'm a husband and I'm an executive coach. I love the world of coaching. I've been a coach for over 22 years and I've worked with over 10,000 people over the course of my career. It's just really what I believe a big part of what I came here to do. And how I got to be an entrepreneur was I just always loved building things. I just loved it. I was building little slingshots in my dad's garage as a kid and ramps for jumping my bike and, electrical things, like basically, melt things down and whatever. And then I always was kind of entrepreneurial. So I had my first business in high school. I was selling under-counter water filters as part of an MLM organization. And then in graduate school, when my daughter came around, I was pursuing a PhD in philosophy. And my plan was to be a professor, to write, to teach, and to do that as a way of making a social impact. And then I found out I was going to be a dad unexpectedly. And there were no jobs in the city where my daughter was going to be. So I was going to be a single dad. And so I left my program after completing all my coursework and I opened a business so I could take my daughter to work. And I opened a business doing the thing I did to make money in graduate school, which was I built custom furniture. So I opened a competing business with the place where I've been working with a friend. And that was my very first company. And it was very successful in terms of being able to bring my daughter to work and make that a possibility for the first 5 years of her life. And then it just turned into a business. I just realized I don't want this business. Like it did what it was meant to do, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So that was my first foray as an entrepreneur. And I will tell you, Ken, it was a really hard journey to be a single dad, working 7-day weeks, working 90-hour weeks, working nights, And so I was so stretched during that time that I think it just sort of like put this soft spot in my heart for the journey of first-time founders, because that was my first time back in the 90s when my daughter was an infant. And so I discovered coaching during that first business when I was really struggling with being a co-parent to my daughter's mom. We really struggled to be good parenting partners when we weren't together in a relationship. And the coaching that I got at that time just completely transformed my whole life. And I was like, whatever that is that I just experienced, I want to learn how to do that. And I want to be great at it. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. That was what replaced philosophy for me. So it was always a dream to make a difference. And coaching was what I found while I was running my first business as a way to do it. So by 2003, I started coaching professionally, and I've been coaching ever since. So it's like almost 23 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. So many pieces that I want to dig in there. I want to say I started coaching about a decade ago, and I started coaching boxing about a decade ago. Now I coach more stuff than that. And the process of learning how to be a great coach, and I've got some students that have pulled off some pretty spectacular stuff. I've got the female fighter of the year on my team in the Ozark 22 district. But now I do creativity coaching and all kinds of other stuff. I have found such joy in not only the abilities that I'm able to transcend from me to other people, but the self-growth that I've gotten by going to, high flow coaching and getting breath work certified and getting flow certified and doing all those things. The self benefit that you have to go through to actually become a good coach is profound.
Yes.
Thank you for going through all of that energy. It's a lot. And I don't think people realize how much we do of our own self-work to help to bring to our students. It's pretty amazing stuff. You used the word success and you followed it by bringing my daughter to work.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, when I found out I was going to be a dad, I felt like I had ruined my life. And I know that's a really terrible thing for a father to say, but at the time that I found out I was going to be a dad, I intended never to get married and I intended never to have children. That was my intention for my life. So when I found out I was going to be a dad, I felt like I had this kind of Sophie's Choice for people who know the reference to the movie. Either I was going to be like a reluctant dad and give my daughter a reluctant dad, or I was going to not, parent my own child. And they were both unacceptable to me. Like I couldn't walk away from my own child, and I didn't want my child to be parented by someone who didn't want to be a parent. And I couldn't find my way to anything else. And so when I walked into her birth, I walked in having done all this work, was writing letters to her. I kept a journal for her. I kept trying to get myself over this hump of like, I ruined my life. Like I'm not going to have the life I thought I was going to have. And it literally wasn't until the midwife put her in my arms, for the first time. And I looked down at that little being. It was the first time in my life as an adult that I experienced love. She taught me what it was to be more committed to someone than myself. And in the second that I saw her, I had this profound transformation. I was just like, okay, yeah, nothing's ever going to take me away from you. My life's going to be about taking care of you and providing for you. And then I was like, okay, so, I want to be around this person. And the only way that's going to happen is if I can take her to work. Because I wasn't with her mom. I knew she's going to be nursing. Just the practicalities of having an infant. She'd be nursing whenever she needed, and I was like, if I can't just be on-call dad, I'm not going to see my child. So that was the impetus for starting the business. And yeah, I had all of this excitement you have, like, oh, I could be my own boss, and I could, I could whatever. And, none of that stuff really works out. It's like, when you're your own boss, you work hard, you work yourself harder than anyone you've ever worked for before, all that stuff. But it was successful in the sense that she came with me to work every week.
That's
Came with
beautiful.
me to work. The people who worked in the building where I knew her and helped me care for her while I was handling customers. And, it was just an incredible way to keep that promise that I silently made to her the first time I held her for those first 5 years of her life.
I love it.
Of course, I learned a lot about business along the way. I was one of those people who was a great technician. I was a great designer. I could build beautiful furniture. I could sell anything to anybody. I had a lot of these basic skills, but I didn't understand business. And I learned business by starting a business and making lots of mistakes.
What is learning business?
Like, what do I mean when I say learning business?
Yeah.
I think business is like I don't mean this to diminish it, but like a game. Like maybe you're really good at games, but when you start a new game, you have to understand the basic rules of the game. You have to understand the strategies, for how to win the game. You have to try different things and realize, oh, that didn't work out the way I thought. So I think of business like a language or like a game that has certain things that tend to work, things that tend not to work, et cetera. And you have to learn so many aspects of that. And a business is fundamentally something that makes someone's life better, such that they're willing to pay you for a product or a service. I mean, you can get it really, really simple, but inside of that, there's also what kind of business do I want to have? How big of a business do I want to have? What are the values I want to run my business from? Does that matter to me? There's so many facets to the game. I didn't know any of that stuff when I started my business. All I knew was I could do this better than that guy. That's all I knew or thought I knew.
Yeah, and then you learn all kinds of new stuff very, very
Right.
quickly. It's amazing. Yeah. I think the biggest misconception on learning business that people don't take into account is relationship building. We think we're buying services or products from a company, but at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're creating relationships with real people that sit on the other side of that vendor chair or that bank or that insurance company or
So
those
true.
things. And creating those relationships, I think, is when you get to the point in business where you start learning how to leverage your relationships and your other assets. And, unfortunately, it took me a long time to realize that in the way that I realize it today. So, I think it's an important thing for people, especially young entrepreneurs today, in a time of AI, social media, networking, global communications, that those relationships can make or break you.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
That's true of investor relationships. It's
Every
true of key
relationship.
employees. I mean, yeah, 100%. Your relationship with your customers. Yeah, absolutely.
I was really hard on one of my general managers for one of my businesses last night. And I was really hard on him. And one of our core values at that business is treat every person you interact with like you would like them to treat you. And at the end of it, he thanked me for being hard on him. And, we actually hugged. And I was like, if I was in the same position, I would want you to be hard on me. Right. If there's consequences coming up down the road that I'm not seeing, and you've communicated to me before and I still don't see them, I need you to be harsh on me. So those relationships are important, and knowing how to manage them back and forth. I'm going to go a little deeper here because you made a statement that, and this is hard. I think a lot of young entrepreneurs are going to go through this. You were going to have a daughter And in your mind, that was destroying your life.
Yeah.
I'm going to make some assumptions and say that took you a while to say out loud. What kind of work did you have to do to, one, acknowledge that, communicate that with your daughter, right? Because we're talking about it now publicly. She could watch this podcast. And how
Well,
do you
she knows.
overcome that?
She knows.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd love to unpack that, because I think, like we're always constantly questioning a lot of people question their movements, and is this the right path? Is this the right thing to do? And you were very open about it. And I think it would help other people to understand, hey, I'm going down this path. It's not the path that I anticipated, but it's a beautiful path and I now love it. How do you reframe that and reposition your mind to do that and communicate that to a person that you love as much as you do your daughter, I'm sure?
Yeah. So just for anyone listening, my daughter's now almost 29, she's 28 and a half. So she's known this for quite some time. But to your question, the truth shall set you free, but first it'll really piss you off. That's the quote, right? And that was one of the gifts that I discovered the first time I had a coaching program back in 2001. The real focus of that program was on authenticity. And so one of the things that helped me over that hurdle was it was a group setting. And in that group setting, I had the opportunity to be a little bit of a fly on the wall before I found my own courage and watched some people get coached from the front of the room, really deal with some really hard stuff, and then have some very courageous conversations, and got to see the light come back into their eyes and be inspired by their courage. And that helped me find my own courage. And the first conversations that I had at that time, because my daughter was too young to really have, she was 3 at that time, was with her mother. And just really acknowledging that I was really afraid of her mom. Her mom was now a mom for the second time. So she had a daughter when we were living together. I was trying to be a stepdad, it's 21 years old, trying to be a stepdad, being in school, lying to myself that I really wanted the relationship, when the fact was I loved her very much, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready or really willing to be someone else's dad. And I wasn't willing to tell the truth because I knew it was going to cost me her. So I was starting off in the relationship not really with the capacity to be honest with myself about how I felt, where I was at. So when I got into this program, I realized I was afraid of her mom because she was such a great mom. And I compared myself to her constantly, and I always came up short. And so the way I dealt with that, not being honest about it, was I just tried to find fault with her everywhere I could, because finding fault with her helped me feel better about myself. So I took it out on her. And that was, when I saw that, I just was like, I was just profoundly ashamed of myself at what I had been doing to this woman, who gave me this child. And so that was my first call in this course. I ran out of the room and called her on the phone. And I will tell you, my heart literally relocated into my throat. Like, it was pounding so hard in my throat. I thought, there's no way I can get these words out. And once I tell her, she's going to say, "Where are you?" And then she's going to come down here and kill me, like literally kill me. When I tell her the truth. And I told her everything as bluntly, as honestly as I could, and I apologized. And I said, I was just horrible to you and it's not your fault. And I just feel afraid. And I promised her that I would stop taking that out on her and just deal with myself. And I was just crying and I was bawling as she was crying. And she didn't kill me. What happened was it restored the connection of our relationship. And it restored my connection to myself. And I started to see myself for the first time as an adult, to really see myself, to have a capacity to be with all of the fears and the lying and the mechanisms, and not to identify with them, but to get there was something beneath that. And that if I could just tell the truth about what I had been up to, if I could just find some compassion or some room to be with what I had done, that I could then walk in the world as an authentic human being and maybe have a shot at making a difference. Because that made a huge difference for her, for me to tell her that. It made I felt like someone took a tank off my back. After that conversation, I felt so free to have finally told the truth. So my introduction to authenticity came from that course, and I was inspired by watching other people. And then I grabbed my courage as hard as I could. And after that moment, I just never let it go. I was hooked.
It's exhausting. I absolutely love it. I couldn't be more in line with that. And I know that would be wildly challenging, right? To have that kind of mindset and then to let it go. What I find so confusing about this whole process is, how can we do these things like before you recognized it, you didn't know you were doing it.
Right.
It's all subconscious. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people don't understand. For me, once I realized that, I was able to give people a lot more grace.
Yes. Yes.
in life. Like, oh, they don't realize that they're hurting me because they're afraid that they might lose me, which is
Right.
the bizarre strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a real strategy that happens in partnership, not just an intimacy partnership, but it also happens in business partnerships, right?
Yes.
This avoidant attachment problem. I understand you explained it beautifully, how you explained it, handled it in a relationship that was failed, but then rekindled. How would you handle that same kind of relationship in a business?
I mean, I don't handle it any differently. Sometimes the nature of the relationship will shift the tone or the timing in which you have the conversation. You might have a different kind of conversation with an investor in your company than you might have with your co-founder about some of the things that you share. But what I find is there's always a place of authenticity from which you can speak, even if you're not telling everyone everything, which is not the same thing as authenticity. You know, so you
Correct.
may not tell everyone everything, but there's always a place of authenticity from which you can speak that will reestablish connection. And really, that's what I find to be the biggest lever and the most important aspect of the work I do is connection. And by connection, I don't just mean connecting two people together in a strong relationship. I mean connection like a world, connection like the way trees are connected underground, where you really get that what happens to one affects everyone. That expression, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
So
It's
above, so
it's a great
below. Yeah,
it's
we're
it's a
all
great it's a great expression, but it's just as true if daddy ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. It's just as true. It's just as true if the baby ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Try to be happy as a parent with a child who's depressed. Good luck. So in business, I handle it the same way, that I really have my eye on, is this person connected to who they are? Are they connected to what's actually happening in reality? Are they connected to the people around them? Are they connected to the frameworks or lenses through which they are experiencing all that either make them effective or ineffective? And so the more I can help people get connected to all of that, the more naturally effective they become, just naturally effective. Like no
absolutely.
one told me how to have that conversation. I just got connected to what was going on. I got connected, and I just spoke the truth, and boom, I became effective in that relationship. No one had to give me principles of effectiveness. And I'm not saying principles aren't useful in business. They're super important. But like 80% of your effectiveness, I think, comes from clarity.
I
Clarity
could
about those
clarity
four
and
things.
boundaries, right? And then
Yep.
I'll tell you, I had this problem for years. I would have these key employees that would at the time seemingly be outstanding employees,
Okay.
but we know that sometimes firefighters like to start fires, right? And
I love it.
I've had that problem more time. That's been the most detrimental problem that I've ever had in business, is having key players, because I like firefighters, right? I like people that can solve big problems fast and that kind of stuff. But I've also had the problem where I've let firefighters sit idle and they start starting fires in my
Yeah.
business. And
Yeah.
it took me way too long to realize that and terminate those relationships. And
Gotcha.
what I had to learn there is very firm, highly communicated boundaries. And I would like to hear your thought process on that. Is that the right approach, or is there some other kind of approach that you can use for those kinds of situations that we get ourselves into? Because I think I'm going to have to blame it 100% on fear.
Okay.
Right.
You mean
I'm
your
afraid
fear?
I'm afraid to lose this employee because they know how
Yeah.
to do this. They know how to do these three things in this weird
Yeah.
emergency.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a rich question. I hear a couple of different questions in what you're saying. You asked about boundaries, and you talked about fear. So, I think what's helpful for helping business leaders understand boundaries is that if you're the founder of a company, you have to appreciate boundaries are different for you as a founder than they are as a husband or a wife. Because just the level of control that you have as a founder, which is by design the way it needs to be, is very different than what you have as a partner in a relationship outside of work. But the principle of how to set boundaries stays the same, right? So with that nuance in mind, like what is a boundary that really works is when I say, hey, if you do X, I'm going to do Y, but not in a punitive way, just like cause and effect. So, in a marriage, that might be like, hey, like if I say to you, I can't talk about this right now, I'm in the wrong state of mind to be productive, I need an hour. And then you chase me around the house trying to force the conversation. So if you do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the house. So it's your choice as to whether or not you're going to keep doing it. I'm not telling you my boundary means that you have to change your behavior. That's not a boundary. That's trying to control somebody or manipulate somebody. That's not a boundary. And I think most people think setting boundaries means I'm going to change the way you act by having some kind of power control. What works with boundaries is, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do if you're going to do X. Hey, if you're going to keep not checking the checklist for your procurement, da 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 da, what I'm going to do is, whatever that is, right? I'm going to ask you every single day, did you check the checklist? I'm going to be all up in your business and you're probably not going to like it, but you're not leaving me much choice here. Or I'm going to terminate you or whatever that is.
Right.
So in business, just like in relationships, if you set a boundary like, hey, if you do X, I'm going to do Y, but you still give the person the choice to do X, you're not controlling their behavior. They just have to deal with the consequences. That's a very adult way to deal with it. It's very empowering.
Yes.
But when it comes to the fear piece, oh my gosh, Ken, this is so challenging, right? Both in business and relationships, because sometimes to be effective, you actually have to go all the way through to the other side of the fear before you're even able to have the conversation. Like you have to imagine, okay, what if I lose this person? And then, oh God, then I have to step in and start working 80-hour weeks, or I'm going to have to tell customers we're going to be late with shipments, or, whatever it is. And like, what's that going to be like? What's going to cost us? You have to get yourself to the other side of the emotional experience to be able to clearly see what's the right thing to do here. Because while you're still wrapped around the axle of trying to avoid the experience you're afraid of having, you won't be able to see clearly. But once you're on the other side of it, and by the way, this is a really interesting, well-known, and very long-standing principle. Once you're on the other side of that experience, even if it's in your imagination, you get your clarity back when you stop resisting having the experience. And you know who used to do this is the, oh my gosh, my brain. This is what happens in the 50s. Like things that just like completely just jump out of your mind. What was the name of those fierce warriors in northern Greece?
The Vikings?
No, Greece. They made the whole movie about them 300.
Gladiators?
What's that?
The Gladiators?
Well, they were called gladiators, but this particular group
The
of
Titans?
gladiators. Anyway, it'll come to me. The point is, the Spartans.
The
Okay?
Spartans.
So what the Spartans used to do is the boys would go into Spartan training school at the age of 10. And what they would have these boys do, because the training was so brutal, it was so hard, it was so painful, they would make them imagine going through the training that day before they went through the training, so that they had already kind of experienced what they were about to go through. And it was almost like an inoculation, right? So then they could go through it with a lot more endurance, with a lot more ability to deal with the pain. And this works in business, this works with fear, is that sometimes you just have to go through the fear experientially and get, oh my God, I'm afraid of not of losing the person. I'm afraid of what it would feel like to lose the person, until you can get, I'm going to be okay. And then you can look and see what's the right thing to do. Because what you have to do in business is you have to do the thing that's best for the business, not the thing that makes you feel most comfortable. And they're often, almost always not the same thing. So that's a really important point you brought up.
Absolutely. And it's funny because my boxing school, we do that same thing. We make them, our last two core values are imagine where you want to be in life and believe that you can get there. So before they ever even get in the ring, we walk them through we walk them through step by step. Like, imagine this is what you're going to do. And then, we have them raise their hand, and then we have them lay on the ground. Like, imagine you're now getting sick in front of 2,000 people booing you. We're cheering that you're back, and then you got to stand up and walk out with pride. So that imagination piece is wildly powerful. So powerful. Sit in those emotions, get all the way through them, experience them, let your body, it sucks, it's horrible, cry, go to a different room, whatever you got to do, let that emotion get all the way through you, let it consume your body and let it pass and get through to the other side. And then, the clarity is so profound that you just really can't do anything much about it.
Yeah.
You know your decisions and you got them. And then it's so clear in your mind, it just moves forward.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well said.
Authenticity does not mean that you say everything. How do I know when to say, when I'm being authentic, right? Because it's, first of all, anybody's watching out there and they feel like they're always authentic. In my mind, authenticity is really challenging to accomplish, wildly challenging to accomplish. I practice it every single day of my life in a way that is fairly profound. How do you gauge when I'm being truly authentic and I'm engaging with somebody, what I can talk about and what I shouldn't talk about?
Well, I think the reason why this becomes challenging is because most of us are trying to figure out what we want to say or what we think we should say or what the right thing to say is. But it works better to go the other direction and to think about any conversation from the point of view of the listener, as opposed to what you want to say. And doesn't mean that you ignore what you want to say, but there's some outcome you're looking for in the relationship. And so whatever the outcome is that's going to happen in the relationship and with the other person, that's what you want to have inform you what there is to say. So even as we're talking right now, so I'm just going to take a brief detour from authenticity and then come back. It's an ongoing challenge for me when I do these interviews, and I do about two a week, that when a question gets asked, the first thing that's there in my mind is all the quote unquote brilliant things that I have to say about that thing that I want to, display. I want to put my brilliance on display. That's kind of how my brain works. But then I have to interrupt that and really be like, well, okay, who's Ken's audience and where is Ken coming from and asking this question and what really wants to get said to fulfill Ken's intention here. And then I do my best to have what I'm saying answer that question instead of what brilliant thing I think I want to say. With authenticity, I might have something that I need to get off my chest in the relationship. And there's a way I can do that actually move something forward between the two of us. And there's a way I can do that where I'm using the other person to deal with something I've got on my chest that I want to get off that doesn't take them into account at all. And so I really think what helps people answer the question, what should I say or what shouldn't I say, is really taking the whole relationship and the other person into account and what it is you're trying to accomplish. And that really helps you understand, that person doesn't need to know this piece. They just need to know this piece. So I'm going to give you an example. Okay. I had a client call right before our interview, and he, I love executive coaching because I get to coach people in their business and their life. So this client's been with me for 2 years. The day we met, the day we started working together, and he created his vision of what he wanted, where he wanted to be. He had all this business stuff, and then personally, he wanted to be married. He wanted to start his family. He's done all that, right? He just got married. And she has 2 kids, so he's an instant dad, and they're starting to have their own children. And he's now facing this challenge that he has all these friends where anytime they said jump, he'd say like, how high? Where do you want to meet? You want to go to Vegas? You want to go here? Do you want to go there? And he was always there. And now there are things coming up that are very important life events for them that aren't just like, hey, let's go on a random trip. They're like, hey, I got engaged. We're going to have a party or whatever. And he's having to make these very difficult choices because his wife now, fiance then, was engaged in a really difficult legal battle with her kid's dad and some mental health issues he has. And, it's challenging. And he's like having to make these difficult choices. He doesn't want to upset anybody. So he doesn't even know, does it work for me to go or not? He's trying to work all this out. Meanwhile, his friends are just kind of like waiting for him to tell them what the deal is, but he's not telling them. So they're angry, not because he's not coming. They're angry because he's not communicating. And he's just trying to figure out, like, how do I not disappoint these people I love over here? How do I not disappoint these children that I now love over here? So he's asking me questions like, how do I find balance? Okay, so this is going back to your point. My answer to him was, you don't. There's no balance. There's no balance there. It's not like if you go into your friend's engagement party and you miss your now son's karate tournament this time, but then next week you flip it and you're at the karate tournament, but you missed the wedding, it all balances out. There's no freaking balance there. That's the wrong question. So you're not going to find balance. You're going to make these tough choices. What's really missing is your being authentic with your friends. Like, hey, you guys, I'm stuck. I want so badly to be there. And I have all this stuff going on over here, some of which I can't even tell you about. And I don't always know what to do, but I know I love you as much as I ever did. And I'm not going to be as available as I used to be. And I need to do a better job of telling you when you can count on my answer, which I'm doing a bad job of. So in the future, I promise to tell you, I'll let you know by this date so you can move on. But just know if I don't show up at something, it's not because I care any less. It's because I'm having to make these challenging choices now. And I hope you can understand. That's all that was missing, right? Now, he didn't need to tell them about the court case and the husband's mental health. They don't need to know. And I told him, I'm like, if you want to share that with them, because it's something you're going through and you want to fully be known, it's okay to do that as long as your wife's okay with it. But you don't want to tell them that to justify what you're doing. That's not the point. They don't need that. They just need to know you love them and it's a tough choice. So the answer to the question comes from the situation. And I think it's a beautifully nuanced challenge for which there's no here are your top 5 principles. I don't know what those are, if there are top 5 principles, but that's how I think about it. You have to look from the other people's point of view and what you're trying to accomplish and let it come from there.
And if you're just open and honest about everything, then it's generally not a problem.
Correct. Even saying, look, there's even more stuff going on here that I want to tell you, but I can't tell you, at least not right now. Yeah. But there's just more stuff going on, right? Because that's honest and that's not telling them everything.
I think what you're saying is respond versus react.
I think
Learning
that's
that skill set,
it's definitely in that skill set.
right?
Definitely in that skill set. And I think it takes more time to figure it out when you're at the beginning of this journey of trying to be vulnerable and authentic in all situations. It takes more thinking. And then as you, like you're saying, though, I try every day, I'm working on this. After you go through enough conversations like this where you screw it up, you're like, oh God, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, I wish I had said this, that you start to have some intuition about it.
I've done a lot of work on just deleting my rearview mirror. And if it happened yesterday, I can't fix it anyway. So I'm just going to keep moving on. And if I can learn from it, I'll learn from it. But that's a challenging one. You said something before we jumped in the interview when we were just talking. That struck me as big. And I wanted to go back to, you saw your daughter for the first time, and seeing your daughter for the first time is a perfect mirror into all of your flaws. I don't have a better way of saying it. It's one of those moments in my life that I can go back to instantly and feel enormous in the universe and tiny in the universe at the same exact time. So it is such an important piece. But from that moment to the time that I found self-love was decades.
Yeah.
Almost
Yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
And you said before we jumped in here, the flywheel of self or something along those lines. Can you talk more about that? Dive into this flywheel that you talked about and how that works and how we can help people amplify that in their lives or use that strategy to amplify their life.
Yeah, this is something that I've discovered over the course of my professional career. This is both true of my career running other people's companies, which I did after I finished my first business. I started running other people's companies for, I don't know, about 17 years before I launched the business that I have now. It's also been true for me in coaching that there's a flywheel of, like, say, your business in your own growth. And so the way you turn your business's growth is the flywheel of your own personal and professional growth. And when your growth stops, what you will find is that your business growth will stop. And I don't just mean revenue growth. Maybe your revenue growth will continue, but something will start to feel stale in your business. The culture might start to feel stale. You might have more churn with your customers or more churn with your employees. Something will stop when your growth stops. And I think that probably the two most powerful crucibles that there are in this world of transformation, maybe three. I've never been a soldier, so I would bet things of that nature are also like this. But your career and your primary relationship in life, those are the two biggest crucibles for your growth that you're ever going to find. I mean, you are in the heat so deep when you own a business, and you are in the heat so deep when you are in a committed relationship, whether it's a marriage or a partnership, and especially if you have children, that will burn you up in a great way if you let it. And so I think one of the purposes of business is to give people the opportunity to express something in the world that is meaningful to themselves. So yourself is already intrinsically connected to your business if you're a founder anyway. So they really do need to grow in partnership. That's what I found. Nurture the one. If you keep working on growing yourself, your skill set, your ability to manage people, your ability to be empathetic, but at the same time, like you said, like be tough, be a hard ass when people need that. Growing all of those things in yourself will just instantly unlock stuff in your business, and your business will grow beautifully as you continue to grow. That's what I have found.
I'm 100% on board with you. I've spent years inside a business that was struggling, looking at every lever and bell and button that I could push how, I've run out of leverage here. I'm out of equity here. I can't figure out how to move forward with this employee. The bank won't give me any more money. Right. And you're just kind of stuck, and yeah, you might have a profitable business, but you're on a plateau. You can't figure out how to get, like, the only good option is looking like jump off the damn plateau.
Yeah.
That's the good looking option to you. But really what you're saying is look inward at that moment as deep as you possibly can. And that inward look will end up transforming your business in a way that you never even understood.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know that that's always the thing to do in every situation, but in the one you described, that's where I would be looking. And I like to keep things simple when I can. I'm not great at it, but when I can do it, I try. And I think a simple way to think about coaching what I do is I work with people to discover what's the next right action of integrity for them to take in any given situation, right? It's just that simple. Because when people are clear, like you said, about your boxers, about what they need to go do, they're way more able to go do it. And so oftentimes what's keeping people from clarity around what's the right next action for them to take is something they haven't dealt with internally. And the other big thing that gets in their way is they don't have a powerful enough or robust enough framework for understanding what's happening externally. So those are the two levers that I see, that people can pull on to gain that clarity of what is the right next action for me to take in this situation. Because
I
that's a great
love
place
that,
to
Cash.
land, right? It's like when you know what that is, it's like there's a freedom there right away.
I actually own mynextaction.com.
Do you?
It just sits
Man.
there. It's a dead website at the moment.
But that's great, by the way. Yeah.
I love it. It's so important to know what your next steps are. I take it a step further. I've been a bit of a hacker my whole life, and I believe that self-identity is almost everything about who we are. And if you can identify, and I'll tell you a problem that I had for years. I didn't want to be known as an entrepreneur.
Oh, interesting.
I thought I was a business guy, right?
Gotcha.
I run businesses. That's what I do. And it was a huge hurdle for me. And to overcome it, to say, well, shit, I guess I'm an entrepreneur. I start businesses. That's what I do, right? And owning that and understanding that that's who I am as a person helped me make decisions so much better. When I was just identifying as a business guy,
Yeah.
right, I wasn't giving myself the right accountability.
Interesting.
Right.
Was there something about being an entrepreneur that you were actively avoiding? Was there some connotation to that word you didn't want to be associated with?
Well, I'm a neurodivergent person, and for neurodivergence, authenticity and accuracy is wildly important. And the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody that takes a significant financial risk or significant risk to start a business. And I've never looked at and I love bootstrapping. It's my favorite thing to do. And to me, not creating was a significant risk and creating was required. So I just thought, oh, this is just what I do, right? I don't need the title. I don't need any of those other things. But at some point it started getting in my way when I'm talking to bankers or things like that. I was hem-hawing about who I was, and I wasn't identifying at myself how the world was identifying me. And there was this mismatch.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
And it was
Yeah,
painful,
yeah.
right? The same thing with
Yeah,
alcoholism, right? I write pretty aggressively against AA for making people stand up and say, I'm an alcoholic every day, because alcoholics relapse. And I think that's their fatal flaw in their system.
Interesting.
And I write about that pretty in depth, that you are who you identify as.
Yes.
And the values of the person you identify as are the values you will inherit. And I don't want to inherit values. I want to create my own. If you want to create something amazing that's different than everybody else, then I think that's one of the requirements.
I think there's something fundamentally authentic about that. And why I say that is because I think a part of authenticity is about understanding your nature, one's nature. And I believe, or I choose to see our nature as we are fundamentally creative. And our brain is designed to make sense of the world through context, through story, through meaning. When there's no meaning the way we experience it in stuff. I think that was the point of that really funny movie, for anyone who's seen it, The Gods Must Be Crazy,
Yeah.
about the Coke bottle. I think it's dropped by the plane by accident. It falls into a tribe of people who have no connection to modernity, and so they've never seen a glass Coke bottle before. So for them, it's not a Coke bottle. There's no Coke bottle in the Coke bottle. For them, it's like a mortar for mortar and pestle, or it's an instrument. It's all these things, but it's not a Coke bottle. So that's just the nature of being human, is that we create. We create things. We want to express ourselves in what we create, including in the stories we create, right? And so for you to say we are what we identify as is to say, yeah, identity is a set of stories that we connect the word I to with a really profound level of integrity, fidelity. But it's obviously plastic, right? You're just one head trauma away from being a completely different person. There's a lot of plasticity to it. So for you to say, I am who I identify as, and the values are the ones I choose to value and honor as opposed to ones I inherited, that's fundamentally authentic. Like, this is my nature. I create by nature, and I'm going to create who I relate to as myself and what I'm going to choose to value. It's an incredible way to go through life. I really appreciate that that's your path.
It's a superpower if you can figure it out. You can do
Yeah.
whatever. You can literally just one morning wake up and choose, this is the avatar that I'm going to create, and these are the values, and these are the things that I'm going to start doing today. And you can become whatever you want to become. You had said something a minute ago, and it's a perfect transition, because I was watching Diary of a CEO the other night, And Steven said that humans are fantastic meaning creators.
Yes.
We create meaning in everything, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But, even Freud says sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Like, not everything has meaning. Coke bottle is just a Coke bottle. That Diary of a CEO is my favorite podcast, Andrew. And at the end of every episode, Steven asks his guest to write a question for the next guest. And I bought his deck of cards, all the questions. And they're handwritten, so I apologize. And I can't read that one, so I'm pulling the next one. This one is from Harley Frankelstein. And what is your proudest moment?
Wow. That one, I'm just to be fully, in communication here, this is one of my least favorite kinds of questions because I'm not good at rank ordering my experiences.
Yeah.
Just generally, I have a very hard time saying this was more or less of an experience than this.
I'm in the same boat as you.
That said, okay, I think it was 2023. I carried my mountain bike, across the finish line of a 104-mile long mountain biking race in Telluride, Colorado, at 10,000 feet of elevation. And that was something that came to me as a dream that I thought for absolute certain there was no way I could ever do in 2022. And my wife challenged me to take it on and to really question my firmly held beliefs about what I was or wasn't capable of. I was not a cyclist. Never done anything like that. And so when I crossed that finish line, I was sick the day of the race. I had altitude sickness. I was in bad shape. And it was like a knockdown, drag out fight from about the end of hour 1 to the end of hour 15 when I finally crossed. And, I had to literally cross over the other side of the veil almost to pull myself through some of the moments where my body was just despairing and I was despairing, and to find some place to pull from. And it deepened my connection with God. There was a moment at around mile 75 when I really didn't think I could go on, and I started praying. And I just said to God, I was like, could someone come down here and pedal? I'm like, I think I'm done. Like, I don't think I can keep going. I don't know that I have anything left. I was 12, 13 hours in or whatever it was. And I heard this voice, and it was not like the voice in my head, which I know exactly what he sounds like. This was like a deeper, chiller kind of a wisdom that was speaking to me. And it said this phrase that was so weird for me. I was raised Jewish. And then by the time I was about 12, I kind of transitioned from relating to God through Judaism to just being more spiritually oriented and non-religious. And this voice sounded super religious. It said, God is great and the greatness of God is within you. So if you're with God, then you have that greatness available to you. To me, that sounded very Christian. And I was immediately like, where did that come from? It doesn't sound like anything I've ever read or heard, but I just was like, but I could tell it was right. And so I just started repeating it to myself as I was paperboying up this hill. So paperboying is when you're like cutting across the slope because it's too steep to ride. So I'm paperboying up the slope and I'm just saying to myself, okay, God's greatness of God. And then all of a sudden, I swear to God, it wasn't like the pain stopped, but the despair stopped. And I just found a way to keep going. And I rode that freaking bike from that point all the way across the finish line 30 miles later in the dark, where the race organizer had left and gone home and locked the gate. I had to carry my bike up over the gate and climb over and carry it across the finish line to finish the race. And I was surrounded by my wife and my friends who came to support me. And I did something I thought for absolute certain I couldn't do ever. And as soon as that happened, I had such an incredible experience of pride, but it wasn't pride. It was a we pride. I mean, it was like my wife and everything she did to support me, my coach, my friends, God. I just felt like this incredible sense of we did it. My wife came, she said, you did it. I was like, no, we did it. We did it. Like, I couldn't have done it without her. I couldn't have done it without whatever that moment was when I crossed over on that mountain. You know what I mean? So I think that's my greatest moment of pride.
Amazing story. Pride is such a weird emotion. I have 2 beautiful children. I married an amazing woman. We're not together anymore, but she's amazing in so many ways. It just didn't work out for us. And I have so much pride in all of those things, right? And it's a different kind of pride, right? I've beaten my chest and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell a story that happened to me recently. When I was 24, 25 years old, I got together with a group of people and we founded a data center here in St. Louis, Missouri.
No way.
And that has been, an undertaking for the past 25 years, to say the least. And we had some pretty big downturns in 2016, 2017, where, not everybody made it out alive. And now we're in 2025 where data centers are, I'm definitely the prettiest boy at prom right now, owning a data center. And, having these first calls earlier this year when data centers are changing and knowing that we're going to be taking on a partner
Wow.
in this data center business. And, I'm not sure exactly how that looks yet, and we're choosing, but knowing that I've created something and I went through the dark side of not knowing if I could make it. I lost dear friends. They lost their lives. Right. And through this whole process, I almost lost my life in liver disease, and I did lose my wife, and, and my days with my son, I lost. But knowing that now I'm sitting in a point to where I get to help mankind through this transition of what we're doing is giving me a tremendous amount of pride in a way that I never even expected to have
Wow.
happen to me. So,
Wow.
and it feels different than having a child or winning a boxing match. I'm a Golden Glove champion, right? Like,
Wow.
I've had my hand held by the ref, and those moments are fantastic and they're prideful, but there's something different about being seen for something you've built or something that you've been through, and being seen by other people is really wild. And if you're watching this episode and you want to chime in on your favorite moment or your proudest moment in your life, please hit us up in the comments. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
I had a wonderful time being with you. Thanks, Ken. You're great. I love the way you dig in, you go deep, you go real. I appreciate you.
Thank you.